Hi, how's everybody doing today? I want to thank you for joining us. Um, I'm Ryan Flanagan. I'm the CEO of Nuance Media, and we're going to be talking about how to sell products on Amazon, some different methods to go about it, some different ways, some kind of tips, pros and cons of the different approaches, and really what you have to do to get set up and start selling on Amazon. Cyrus, you want to introduce yourself really quickly?
Sure. My name is Cyrus Rupers, and I've been working in the Amazon sphere for quite a long time now. Yeah, I think I'm going on my seventh year, and every year is different. So.
Cyrus is very bashful. He himself has sold over $25 million worth of products on this. He's been doing this for 6 years. Nuance, we've done over $150 million in products, but enough about us. Let's get talking about Amazon and what we really want to focus on here. Quickly, before we go to the next thing, I do want to say if you comment keyword below, you can get a free Amazon analysis, a keyword analysis. This is really about finding how competitive your keyword is, the search volume, all these other types of things, and it's kind of the first step in understanding if Amazon's a good opportunity for you. So feel free to comment below keyword and you will get that. We do have some people hopping in already. So Sam, good morning to you. Looking forward to this. And then this is my personal profile from yesterday. I'm looking forward to seeing everybody. So now we are seeing everybody. So thank you for being here. Okay, so before we get into the kind of nitty gritty of this, I do want to go over that this is an Amazon series. We're talking about different things, and the kind of overall concept of this series is what you need to know about the Amazon, to be an Amazon seller's market, to be an Amazon seller, what you need to know about Amazon seller's market. This topic today, as I said before, is really about how to sell on Amazon, and this is really about this is really for people who are either already selling online somewhere and they're thinking about selling on Amazon, people who are already on Amazon and are looking to optimize and do some different things like that, make more bang for your buck, and then the final other people are people who are really looking to launch and need to identify if Amazon's a good opportunity for you. Okay, so let's get into it. What do you, Cyrus, I'm going to ask you, what do you really need to know to be able to get on and start selling on Amazon? What are the basics that we need to have going on here?
Right. So, when you're really just getting started, yeah, regardless of if you're an existing company or if you are starting a new company, first you need to know your product, and you need to know the profitability about your product, because when you sell on Amazon, it's going to be a little bit different than if you're selling on your own website or selling in retail stores. The economics are going to be a little bit different. So you kind of have to be aware of what selling on Amazon is going to look like and how much you can stand to profit. And it may be a little bit thinner, maybe a little bit less than you might be used to on your own website, but at the same time, you can end up selling a whole lot more units. And then from there, based on the product and a real intimate knowledge of what you're looking to sell, kind of work through and identify the types of keywords that you might want to be gaining organic search ranking for in order to really get that traffic and get the sales that you need. And that's really the core of it. And then a lot of the other things kind of fall into place after that.
Yeah, and 1,000-foot view here is you need to start an Amazon business. That's step one to get on there, not 11, one. You need to decide if you're going to do a branded store versus marketplace. Honestly, decide what you're going to sell. Hopefully, if you've already set up a store, then you know what to do. You need to do a competitive analysis to see what the market looks like, how to win the buy box, focus on creating a plan of action to get into this. Then you have to do listing optimization, and then you have to do promotion. So there's a lot of steps with this in order to get it up and get running on this. The plan of action is really important with this, and then honestly getting your sales velocity up enough so you're ranking for organically for keywords is really where you make the vast majority of sales. So those are kind of the overall things. Cyrus, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, and like you really nailed it on the head here, because it's like I think there's a lot of a lot of conversations that you and I have come across. It's like people essentially people have actually listed on it, sold it, tried to sell on Amazon without even creating a business to begin with, or creating an entity it separates. That's craziness in and of itself. But also to try to list a product and expect sales to come in without any sort of real marketing plan behind it, or real idea of how you're gonna stand out in this marketplace. I mean, it's one of the most competitive arenas to try to sell a product in. I mean, think about how many people, I think that there's what, 2,000, 3,000 people a day that are joining.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
you really have to plan how you're going to market, and how you're going to market better than the other 2,900 people out there. And that's a really important point you brought up.
Right. There's a lot to that. We're getting a ton of reactions, so thank you all for giving us the smiley faces, the love. We really appreciate all that. We are, we're very sensitive here, so we really appreciate that. Particularly Cyrus, not just joking. Okay, so let's get to the next thing. Why don't we talk about kind of the pros and cons of do-it-yourself? Right, this is the tried and true methodology. There are definitely some pros and cons. The setting up of your own Amazon store, or optimizing your own, and doing a variety of things like that. Cyrus, you kind of want to walk us through that?
Yeah, sure. So, on the pro side of things, it's certainly doing everything yourself requires, there's no real cash outflow, cash expenditure for hiring help. It requires at least upfront investment, and it's really just your time and your attention going into it. So, it's not so much a function of how much resources you have outside of those things. You're in full control of the decision making in every single part of the business, every nook and cranny, which is, if you're just starting out, that could be a great thing to have under your control, or have under the thumb. And then, of course, especially if you're new to this sort of e-commerce and the Amazon arena, you do learn a lot. I mean, you learn everything from, now how fast you learn it, of course, is a different story. But you do learn, things about marketing, the pricing of your product, how to position it, how to negotiate with suppliers, how to make sure that you're getting a steady supply, you never run out of stock, managing cash flow. I mean, there's so many things under this umbrella of running an Amazon business you end up learning. And yeah, when you do DIY, you end up doing a lot of those. And you kind of have to you have to learn them. I mean, everything starts and stops with you.
Right. and that's, Amazon, as we've discussed before, is 49% of e-commerce right now, right? It's growing rapidly. Opportunity right now to go in and get it out. So can you talk us through some of those were really some of the pros, but what are some of the cons of doing it yourself?
Yeah, well, I mean, first and foremost, all those things that I mentioned, which you're learning, also take a lot of time. And if you're not, if you don't have an efficient system in place, I mean, it takes a lot of time. And of course, you only really have 24 hours in a day, and you're really effectively working 10 to 12 hours. Unless you're a machine, you're working 16 hours. I mean, it's still a finite amount of time. And, what you don't know can definitely hurt you and stuff. And so if you're focusing on the wrong things, you may not be doing the correct type of research, or you may not really understand the marketplace enough, and may make a wrong decision about your product, or how to price it, or how to market it, or how to present it on your listing. You really run the risk of making mistakes that, if you had outside help, if you brought in some experts, could easily be avoided. For example, not running advertising properly. If you just spin up an automatic campaign and a manual campaign without any sort of adjustments or proper configurations to really maintain as much control over your advertising as possible, that's a really costly mistake, both time-wise and cost-wise, that super avoidable, very, very avoidable. And, more broadly, it's, especially when you're using, do-it-yourself software and a lot of these self-service tools, a lot of them especially in the Amazon space, aren't that well engineered, and they have you tend to focus on a lot of the things that aren't necessarily important. So, bestseller rank might be a metric that comes up in these tools a lot, and you don't really need to focus on that so much. And you're learning a lot, sort of like it's trial by fire. And in an ecosystem like Amazon, where there's very little margin for error, and you're one slight misstep away from an accidental suspension, even if it's an honest mistake. It's one of those things that you don't necessarily want to risk it, especially if it's core to your business. It's just going DIY can end up costing you a lot in time and money. And
we've had a number of clients that accidentally got suspended, and then it's just to be very, it's a nightmare to try to get back on. Hours and hours and hours and weeks and weeks and weeks to try to get back on. Talking to third-party services, navigating it. It's just a real pain if you get booted. And I've even had some people think that they might need to start another company in order to get back onto Amazon. Like it can be, and think about filing an EIN and filing a new company and all those type of things. So if you don't do it right, in fact, I had another case that we actually didn't engage as a client, but somebody who apparently had set up their store and then didn't make any sales for about 90 days, and then Amazon booted them because they didn't have any sales for a certain amount of time, and they said, come back next year, which was the first time I had heard of that. But like that's
I've never
like,
heard I've never heard of anyone on Amazon for 90 days. That's impressive. That they had their plan must have been airtight.
So anyway, pro tip, you can do it yourself. Go for it if you want. We highly, highly recommend at least getting some consulting, getting a plan of action, getting best practices in there and all those type of things. Because if you don't do that, it can set you back a year. It can set you back a whole bunch of time, and time is money. The opportunity is now. So pro tip on our side is get some consulting. You can do it yourself. I'm all about perpetual learning and doing those type of things, but really think about that when you're engaging in that. Cyrus, do you want to add anything else to
that? Yeah, like I guess the pro tip of not doing it is a really good one.
if you can, like if you're starting up and you don't have any revenue or you don't have anything like that, you can understand the DIY side of it because you need to figure it out. But at least get a plan of action or consultant.
Yeah, in that case, do your homework and make sure you're focusing on the right things. But if you can handle it, work with an expert.
Yeah. Okay, so we're discouraging the DIY level of it just because of the mistakes that can happen and the setbacks you can have. But what are some other ways that we can go about really working with a partner to get this up, get this going? And can you talk to us a little bit about the pros and cons of a freelancer?
Sure. So, there's a couple of types of freelancers, but generally speaking, when you're working with, a single person or husband and wife team or maybe someone offshore, if you're working with a freelancer individually and not so much as part of an overarching organization, you end up getting a cheaper hourly rate, particularly if you go offshore. You get someone who's very proficient in a specialized set of skills, and there's a big contingency that you have to hire correctly, so you have to actually hire someone that is good at what they say they do, and you have to be able to vet for that. But if you do, they're going to be very good at what they do. You need to know, you know exactly who you can hold accountable. So, if something is, let's say you're hiring a pay-per-click advertising guy, and the pay-per-click advertising isn't going so well, you know exactly who to email or call and be like, and to get things fixed up. And freelancers in general, the nature of the engagement with a freelancer is fairly short term, so it's not a terribly long commitment, and it's a great way to work on a short term project. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. And then what are some of the cons of working with a freelancer?
Well, I think it's kind of the same thing as the DIY, where there's only 24 hours in a day, and so I guess between your 12 hours and their 12 hours, provided that they're working full 12 hours for you. I mean, you only have a fixed amount of bandwidth. And, one of the biggest risks, when it comes to building building a company, building an organization, is you need to have some sort of, over time, work towards having a built-in redundancy plan. Like, let's say that there's a medical emergency, or they take some personal time off, or burnout, or frankly they just could become disengaged with your project. Like, you just happen not to get along or anything like that. Then, what ends up happening is that the work that you had sort of mentally delegated to them falls back on you when you're unprepared for it. And that's a big risk, because either you hop back in and you don't work, there's a suboptimal output, or things like that. There's no real redundancy plan to it. And let's say that
they're only focusing on one area, right? Like, if they're focusing just on the pay-per-click and aren't taking a holistic approach on, well, how does this work for your blended A costs, or anything like that, or keyword optimization, or any of these other type of things.
Right. And actually, to that point, I mean, if you happen to have a team of freelancers, each of them focusing on a small piece, like keyword research, listing optimization, PPC, managing them all so that they're working in one sort of a well-aligned fashion in itself. I mean, you need to be on your A game for, with respect to project management, to really make sure that everyone's completely aligned. Otherwise, you get miscommunications, and that part really ends up falling on you as well. So there is a little bit of a downside to having just a bunch of specialists versus that may not necessarily have a history of working and coordinating with one another.
Yep. The other thing that we've seen in Amazon and other areas too, sometimes freelancers sometimes get a full-time job and disappear. Freelancers sometimes are unavailable when there's crisis. They're not insured. There's some other things, and you have to manage them all. So the cost of this can also be a lot of time to find one, and then find one that you like, and then if that person ever goes away, then you have to find somebody else. So there's some inherent management time with that as well.
Well, and actually, to that point, if you try to put, I would insist that everyone tries and post a public job post on Upwork, and just enjoy the hundreds of low quality proposals that come in for the work. And you'll see that first of all, sourcing the candidate is time intensive, but then keeping them engaged is also time intensive. And if and when you may have to train them, or really work with them to level up their skills to a level that you need. There's a lot of things that ultimately fall on you when you work with a freelancer that way too.
Right, and then are they just acting without doing any research or strategy on there to actually make you money? Or are they just looking at like an hourly gig? So those are some of the things with that. Do you have any pro tips with this one, Cyrus?
I do, and sorry, I just need to.
Yeah,
a little sip
I'm bringing
of
it.
There's something to be said about the flexibility and the cost effectiveness of working with the freelancers. But if you do go that route, you have to be very, very intentional of, the scope of work that you intend to have them work on. And you also have to be very intimately aware of what that scope of work actually means. So you don't necessarily have to be a PPC expert, but you have to be able to speak the language of PPC so that, it's not a one-way discussion. You need to be openly communicative. You need to be very respectful of the time too. So I mean, they're people just as well. And then the pro tip is just please don't micromanage. That's like the big thing.
Well, and that's the type of thing is because it's your life, right, and it's your business. Then you're trying to direct them on how to do things, and that could be. Then you lose your freelancer, and then you're in real trouble. Okay, so let's talk about agencies here really quick. So what are some of the pros to working with an agency?
So you kind of a little bit to that point of like the redundancy piece is that you are you're working with an organization that is completely built on this premise of accountability and reliability. I mean, the whole point of having an agency with several staff members on board is that in case something happens to one team member, there's a fallback of, let's say at any given point, 4 or 5 team members, 6, 7 team members, where there's slack being picked up that you're not necessarily, you don't have to go find the solution for something happening like that. And, life gets in the way, and, it's really helpful to have that part taken care of already. Inside of an agency, there are already going to be team members and people inside the organization that are themselves specialists in a certain area. But as a whole, the overall agency offering is actually more, it's a piece together suite, a more holistic suite of these piece together services. So it becomes more of a turnkey, done for you type of system. Which in itself is pretty awesome, because then you can essentially go to, if you're very unfamiliar with how to really do an Amazon business right, you go to an agency and be like, give me an Amazon business, and they can say, sure thing.
Yeah.
They actually could say sure thing. There is, you're more likely than not, you end up working long term with an agency, and over the course of that relationship, not only are you growing and becoming a better business owner side by side with the agency, but they're also investing serious resources in training and educating, their staff, and developing new tools and strategies that they're going to be working with you on. And so there's a lot of, over the span of this long-term relationship, there's a lot of mutually symbiotic activity going on, where there's a lot of growth side by side, and you as the client end up actually benefiting more, but the agency also benefits as well. And then, the quality of, the quality of the type of contacts that you end up making, the type of people that the agency can put you in touch with, because most of the people that are working inside of this agency are, seasoned professionals. There's top talent at every layer of management inside of an agency. You end up coming away with, a better network, a better quality network, and better ideas. And that more so than any given tactic is probably the most important part of working with an agency.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And when I look at this, the other compelling thing that we see too is, and I run an agency, right? So I'm going to be biased. I'm going to just be very candid about that, because I've seen the pitfalls with working with a freelancer or doing it yourself, or these other types of things. But agencies are typically insured, so if they screw you, you can, pardon the French, you can sue them, which is really a nice thing. Not that we've ever been sued, but at least you can rely on that comfortability with that. When you call, they'll pick up the phone, which is another really nice thing. And then because, we, for example, are doing this with so many different clients, that you really get best practices, and you're keeping up with industry trends and all these type of things. So I can come in with a high confidence rate and say, we've done this 50 times or 100 times, or we've sold 150 million products online. I know the strategy to implement, and these are going to be my best assumption on the results. Compared to being the first time that you've ever marketed something, or first time you've ever set anything up on Amazon, or if a freelancer's only done it 5 to 10 times, these are the different things that you really get out of it. With that being said, Cyrus, why don't you talk to us about some of the cons of working with an agency?
Right. Well, I mean, obviously, first off, the big part is that it's a bigger upfront investment. You're paying, the investment that you make is of, let's say, 10 people and 10 very skilled people versus, let's say, 1. So it's just a bigger upfront investment. And so it's something you need to be very mindful of, especially in the early days of the business, where you may not be cash flow positive. You need to be really mindful of like what that does to your cash flow and to your business. And then to really maximize the relationship with an agency, what you put in is what you get out, and so you would need to stay engaged with the agency and work with your account manager and be very communicative, and you have to. It's not just a set it and forget it. As much as I like to say that it would be a turnkey solution, you also need to play your part, and you're the important part of the team, but you need to keep the agency engaged. And then it's actually when you hand a big swath of responsibility over to an agency, you're going to inevitably lose control over a lot of details in the business, a lot of nitty-gritty decisions, which early on are important. But you know what? Honestly, when it comes to the smaller decisions, I actually would think that's actually kind of a good thing. But there are decisions that you're kind of ceding control to, and so that it's both a pro because you get time back, but also a con because you might end up making the better decision, but you also might not.
Yeah. The other thing with that is, and I know you talked about this, but there's going to be a sunk cost with the agency. But if an agency is worth its salt, it's going to do the analysis and say, this is the overall looking at if you do the sunk cost, because you have to set things up right. You have to be really focused on this, and you have to have things working well. Sorry, I switched to Cyrus. Okay. I'm playing with the toys here, guys, so sorry, I apologize for that up front. But with this type of thing, it takes money to make money, and that's the reality of it. And to set up your listings appropriately, to optimize them, to get on the 6-pack for a particular keywords or a number of keywords, that takes a little investment up front. But once you get there, the value of that throughout it is very, very large. So those are the type of things, and those are the type of real conversations you have to have with yourself when you're making this decision. Cyrus, do you have a pro tip for us?
And I'd say like more so just because this is just kind of the way it takes a little bit of time to like build momentum. So really with any relationship, I mean, this both goes for freelancers and agencies, but you have to give it a trial period, and let's say give it if you can, provided you don't it's clearly not a big cultural mismatch between how you work with the agency or how you work with freelancers. Just give it some time, give it a trial period of at least 3 months. Temper your expectations that you're not going to go from 0 to $1 million in a month, because while we both have seen some pretty astounding results, doubling, tripling businesses in a matter of 2-3 months, it does take a little bit of legwork and to build that foundation, and first to also learn the business and to learn how to work with one another. So take that time and really respect the time it takes to to build that rapport and to build the momentum that the latter months will really benefit from, and just kind of be patient with it. That's a really big part of it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. If we do have a few questions here, if anybody else has any other questions, feel free to put them out there. One that we had a person write in about earlier was, and I'll just kind of post this up here. Sorry for that. We have, looks like Nikita here. Is there any way I can persuade buyers to leave more product reviews?
Well, yeah, you have to be very careful of that, of course. But I mean, what you could
that could
do
be
is
a OS violation, right? That's the
the most scrutinized area of Amazon. So be very, very careful. You don't want to talk about the accidental. Talk about the accidental misstep that gets your account suspended. This is like the area. Yeah, I mean, you can follow up with the buyer. You can ask for product feedback in a way that doesn't incentivize them to leave a positive or 5-star review, but to leave an honest review. You can do that within reason, and Amazon has guidelines for that. But you can't proactively solicit reviews quite like you can only gently ask a certain amount of times. Yeah.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. This is a question we had previously as well is, what is the most difficult thing about setting up an Amazon account?
If you're starting from scratch and this is your first time inside of Seller Central, or most likely Seller Central, let's hope Seller Central or Vendor Central, but Seller Central. You know, doing the listing the right way. You know, the amount of times that I might go into an account and see that a listing is like, you know, there's no proper SEO done. There's no keyword focus. You know, the images don't look good. The copy's not very good. I mean, like, that's probably the toughest part to do well. And I'm not sure if that was the original question, but that's like the toughest part to do well. I mean, Amazon's made the actual signing up for an account super easy, but to actually set up a listing and to do it well and to kind of create a listing that stands out is the toughest part.
Okay. All right, we're going to hold on the other questions because we try to keep these to half an hour. Cyrus, I want to thank you for joining us today. Everybody who hopped in, I appreciate you joining us today. Again, we were talking about how to sell products on Amazon today. We will be having another level in the series next week, talking about other Amazon best practices, little known tips, a variety of things like that. To keep up with these, please like Nuance Media, and you can do that on Facebook, on YouTube, on a variety of different areas with that to keep up with us. And we look forward to seeing you again shortly. Thanks, and have a wonderful day. Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.